learning objectives. So obviously, we do want to learn something, not just have fun. I do enjoy just having a good time because I think the thing that no matter what you're doing and what I do, I'm more of a marketing guy who now works for a software company. I'll tell you that story here in a second. But whatever you're doing, we all have one thing in common, right? We're all human beings. We all have similar experiences. Nobody's the same. It's built for one. Everybody has a different life experience. But some of the things we will talk about here are certainly applicable across all disciplines, all types of jobs and functions. And I hope you'll find that to be true. So these are the objectives, but let's get into a quick disclaimer. I mentioned already, Michael and I both work for Aptura, the global work tech software provider delivering real solutions for your facility. And that's one of the many taglines you'll hear on this podcast. So anyway, I did mention I'm a podcast host. Anybody listen to podcasts by chance? All right. Anybody listen to these podcasts or have heard these podcasts? All right, one guy. I appreciate it. Normally I wait for my mom to yell in the back, hey, I'm here, Mike. But that's always encouraging. Listen, if you don't listen, I know there's a ton of episodes and podcasts out there now. I've been doing this for quite a long time. I started, and I'll tell you the story, because I think it's a life lesson story, and it's happened over the last 10 years, so it really has changed my life dramatically. But what we do on these shows is, again, talk to industry leaders in your world, facility managers, corporate real estate executives, engineers, people who are in the world of work in the workplace. And then we get into strategy and inspiration around what it takes to be a leader in today's marketplace. And obviously we've been through a lot the last several years. We talk about that and how things have changed and what's going to happen next with all the technology and advancement going on in our world. And what I'll do on that show, just to kick things off, is to ask my guests about music. It's a way I find a way to get to the personal side of my guests. And I have kind of a guest. We're co-presenters today, but Michael and I are going to play the role of I'm the host and he's the expert. So Michael, I'll ask you, what is it you listen to? Let these folks know a little of your personality by sharing a song or artist that gets you inspired.
I listen to a lot of everything. I think I would, that's a good question. But lately, and I've sort of been drawn back to one of my favorites, the band The Cranberries.
Yeah,
I remember when I was...
Dolores O'Riordan, everybody know the Cranberries?
I remember when I was younger,
ago.
my mom bought their CD, I think it was, and I heard Zombie for the first time, and that was sort of my first introduction to, and then Linger, that got me through some good and bad relationships.
So many good ones. Dreams, yeah.
Dreams.
So the Cranberries fans, I have a little Irish in me, my heritage, whenever I hear a Dolores type accent, where she does that really unique voice inflection. It's not me or my family in your head, and the guns and the bombs. Remember that one? All right, anyway. Come on, Michael. In your head. All right, you get the idea. So that's the kind of stuff we do on this show. Immediately, now you feel like you know Michael, right? And know me a little bit, unfortunately. My bad podcast karaoke is one of the things I'm known for. So anyway, they call me DJ Mike P on the show, but it's really my honor and my privilege. I've done over 500 interviews over the last 10 years. And it's just been a thrill to do it in a way that is helping the community and really kind of just watching us all and bringing us all along as we go through the change. There's lots of change happening in our world. One thing that's constant is change, right? So we talk about it a lot on the show. We'll get to it here today as well. Real quick plug for our new venture, though. Anybody familiar with this show? Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, Jerry Seinfeld about 10, 15 years ago started this little web series, which became now a Netflix series, where he gets in the car with friends, other comedians, and they just kind of hang out. They go grab a cup of coffee and they talk. That was my original idea for the podcast. About 10 years ago, I wanted to do something like Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. I wanted to call it FMs in Cars Getting Coffee. And I did a few videos. They're still out on YouTube if you go looking for them under the FM Innovator brand. But it was really hard, first of all, to produce it as a one-man show, but also to get my fellow facility managers to sit in front of a camera and talk. Anybody comfortable doing that? It's not so much fun. But anyway, we decided to go audio only on the podcast, and that's what made it much more accessible, and more friends of mine were willing to sit down and talk to me. But here we go, full circle, 7, 8, 9 years later. I have now the resources with Aptura. We have an in-house videographer, and just about 6 months or so, we started recording a series of videos called On My Way to Work, and it's on YouTube. It's on the Aptura YouTube channel. It's pretty easy to find if you Google it. And you'll see here I do in-the-car interviews with some friends from the Washington, D.C. area. Top there is Peter Van Enberg from CBRE. He's the global head of facilities and real estate for CBRE. In the middle, we got Andre Jones from Capital One. Anybody familiar with the Capital One headquarters there in Tyson's Corner? Fantastic facility. He runs that facility along with his team. And then a longtime friend of mine from the Capital chapter of IFMA, Lena Thompson, and I sat in the car. And she's from the American Psychological Association, and she's a longtime facilities director as well. So people who are doing what you do, willing to sit down with me, have a little fun in the car. Some bad singing goes a long way, and we have a lot of inspiration and fun, and hopefully some things that'll really resonate with you because you're in this world. So the other thing I do on the show is ask my guests for an inspirational quote. Michael, I didn't ask you for a quote, but I brought one because I need to get inspired. There's lots going on in our world, a lot of change, a lot of challenge, a lot of things you're talking about here at the conference. In fact, yesterday, anybody in the general opening session with my friend John Reimer, fantastic guest on the show several times. If you go back into the archives, John's been on the show maybe 3 times. And he shares a lot of stuff that is very applicable to what you're dealing with. And he touched on a lot of the points that I'll expand on here and hopefully inspire you to continue on your journey of FM change. Anybody know who this guy is? This is one of my inspirations because I'm a marketing guy. He's a guy named Seth Godin. He's kind of a marketing guru who's written a lot of books about marketing and advertising and why those things work on us because we're human beings. And he understands human nature and psychology and anthropology and sociology and why people do the things they do. And I'm always fascinated by that. And I've always wanted to share that. And one thing that you all may need to hear this morning is that you have an opportunity to be a linchpin in your organization and in your career. And what Seth says in his book, Linchpin, he says, hey, become indispensable. Not a worker who needs to take direction. A linchpin does not need a rule book. They delight others because that's what they love to do. And I know many of you are linchpins. You're delighting the people that occupy your facilities, and that's what we do as FM, often unrecognized, often without the credit that we deserve. But I want to encourage you to continue to do that, but also continue to evolve and be ready for what comes next. So we're going to talk about that. The first question I always ask my guests on the podcast is, where are we now? Where do you see us today? And obviously I mentioned we've been through a global pandemic. We've been through a revolution in technology. We've been through a revolution in automation. We've been through change in culture and society, how people view work and the workplace. And all those things are enough fodder to fill an hour. But for this little presentation, I'm just going to introduce you to some of the recent concepts that have kind of risen to the surface again and again on both of my podcasts, whether we're talking about that workplace experience, the employee experience on the Workplace Innovator, or we're talking about asset life cycles and asset management, which is more the focus of this event. We're going to talk about that. But where are we now? Listen, like John said yesterday, we need to look towards evolving as a profession, elevating ourselves, being inspirational leaders and leading our teams, leading our organizations, getting that seat at the table to share the story of what is important and the value that the facilities that we manage bring to our people and our teams. So a way to do that, one of the main levers you have to pull is technology. And again, I'm so glad to hear John Reimer say, if you're not already using some of these technologies, please investigate them at the Expo Hall, learn about CMMS, learn about IWMS, learn about all of the enterprise asset management software tools that are available. Again, not a commercial for Aptura specifically, but we're in that space and we're trying to deliver some of the tools that will help you in the future of the built environment. Just a quick sampling of some recent episodes, some recent episodes on the Asset Champion podcast. Episode 112 was, again, Andre Jones on his site at Capital One in Tysons. I sat down with him and a good friend of ours, Kevin Good, who has now the director of facilities at the DC Bar Association. But prior to that, he was the director of facilities at SiriusXM in DC and then Comcast. So he's been in the world of enterprise asset management and workplace management. And we talked about how it is really challenging today in all the complexities of the workforce and workplace and AI being introduced into our world, and how do we leverage these tools to be part of this future. And again, listen to the episode for the details, but I guess the takeaway from Andre and Kevin was that what you do is essential. The human element of all this is not going away. Your need for elevating your skill set, your emotional intelligence. That may change. That may require you to get uncomfortable again and learn some new things. But your need to take what AI gives us as far as great analysis of data in a much faster way than any human can, you're ready to be the one that takes that and then makes the right decision, the actionable insights that come from all these tools. In the middle, I had a great conversation, one of a series of conversations I recorded in Las Vegas last December for Autodesk University. Everybody familiar with who Autodesk is? So Autodesk, for anybody in the early stages of a building construction and design, AEC contractors use Autodesk to develop the plans for the actual construction of the facility. And then what happens is often that gets done and then it's handed off to you all to manage and operate and maintain that facility. And there's this huge gap. The information that you could really use about the systems and assets that are being presented over and handed over to you are missing. So this great opportunity we have in the asset lifecycle to better be at those discussions at the very beginning of the asset lifecycle, be there where those conversations are happening, and then be able to give your input and your expertise about what's going on down the pipeline when that building is handed over, and then 2/3 of its operating expenses taking place during the operation part of the cycle, not the construction part. So we talk a lot about that, and there's some folks in the world of IFMA that are specializing in this, the IT community. If you're looking for another source of expertise, the IFMA IT community is one. This is Ted Ritter and Jeff Williams, very well-known gentlemen there who have worked in this world, and they see this opportunity to move things along, digital twins, BIM. We've talked about it here many, many times for a long, long time, but really there's some things happening now with this collaboration with Autodesk and bringing in industries from the FM side saying, let's bring us along on the ride. Don't wait till you hand over the facility to us and expect us to run with it and then have to deal with some of the mistakes you made. Let's get involved together early on. And then finally, one of the things we want to mention today is the opportunity to share the next generation of FM leaders. Where are they coming from? I think John, again, mentioned it yesterday. I was so thrilled to hear it that we need to fill that gap, the skills gap, the FM story that we all know so well of the retiring experts in our industry and who's going to take over, who's going to step in. Obviously, there won't be as many of us, there won't be as many human bodies involved, but we need to work with the younger people and give them an opportunity to get excited about what FM brings to the table and prepare them for what comes next. And that becomes a conversation about mentorship. It becomes a conversation about knowing who they are and what they're looking for in their careers, which may be different than what you and I experienced a few years ago when we were starting out. So all that said, Denise Besiktepe, and that was a tough name for me to say on the show. She's from Istanbul, Turkey, and now living in the United States and teaching at Purdue University. And she said one thing that was a really great takeaway. If you're curious to know about this younger generation, the Gen Zs, and those that seem so ready with technology to step in and use all these great AI and FM technology tools, and they're going to be so much more equipped to do it than maybe you feel like you were, it's not necessarily true. They are very comfortable with their personal tech, but when it gets into some of the nitty-gritty of what goes on in a CMMS system or some of these other technologies that are relevant to the built environment, they struggle with that level of detail. So they're going to really need to be adaptable and use what their skill set is, which is kind of comfort in that space, but then have to use the tools in the proper way. So we all have to be in this together, and it's a journey we're on together. So let's make sure we're doing that. All right. Here we go. Whoops, real quick. Here's a fun quote that I've used before, and it's from Bill Gates. It says, "We always overestimate the change that will occur in the next 2 years and underestimate the change that will occur in the next 10. And isn't that true? If you don't believe that, think about what I used to talk about when I first started giving speeches at facility management conferences. It was about the year 2017, and I'll share about that here in a second, but it was this idea that we're 10 years into the iPhone. The iPhone was introduced in 2007, and how many people got an iPhone in 2007 or the first couple of years? A handful, a couple early adopters over here. I was a BlackBerry guy. Anybody else BlackBerry? I'm like, I'm never giving up my BlackBerry. Well, listen, 2 years later, that was still true. 2009, 2010, But something happened in the early 2011, 12, 13 range where all of a sudden many of us abandoned our BlackBerry, saw the extra value that the iPhone brought or a Google device brought, and we made the shift. And where is BlackBerry now? I just saw a documentary on one of my streaming services. I haven't watched it yet, but there's some story about the fall of BlackBerry. They didn't adapt, they didn't adjust quick enough, right? So 2 years, the Apple iPhone didn't change my world, but 10 years later in 2017, I stood up in front of a crowd in Ireland, at Dublin. I had a chance to speak in front of a facility management conference there. It was a thrill, an honor for me. And I had this story where I told about the fact that 10 years later, wow, looking back, we're like, this is amazing. So here we are, 2024, and you're hearing stories throughout this conference about AI, about other technologies, about some of the changes in the built environment because of the post-COVID experiment we're all in that continues and will continue on. We've changed fundamentally in so many ways. And you're saying, well, I can still do my job. I go in every day, and I'm still able to deliver what I do. My expertise is still relevant and valuable today. That may be true now, may be true 2 years from now, but it may not be true 10 years from now. And just to illustrate that very quickly before I turn it over to Michael for his some of his practical advice and the software available to you. I wish I could get this to work better.
Yep. I'll take care of that for you.
All right, real quick, story time. Let me try because I jumped through a lot of this fast. All right, my first NFMT. Who was here with me in 2016? All right, one person. Remember the theme of the opening session? There's some clues on the screen. The theme was Star Wars, and I'm a huge Star Wars nerd. Loved it, so much fun, really enjoyed it. I was just one of you sitting in the crowd watching and listening and going, wow, this world of facility management is so vast and so complex, and there's so many areas where I could get involved. And even though I'm a marketing guy, I just love these people. You people, you're my people. I love the idea of just your humble servant nature and the way you like to bring your best selves to work and deliver on the expectations of your people and take care of these facilities, and you understand the technical side, and it's so fantastic. I got so excited. I'm like, I need to get more involved with this NFMT and IFMA and other associations. So around that time, go ahead, Michael, you have to do my advancing here. Around that time, my world was kind of falling apart because I had my cheese moved. Anybody familiar with the Who Moved My Cheese book? Yes, many of you are, and maybe half or more of you are not. If you are not, pick up a copy of this book. It was written in the 90s, absolutely as relevant today, if not more so than it was back then. Dr. Spencer Johnson talks about, and again, spoiler alert, it's a short story, but the idea being that a mouse would go into a maze each day for a big pile of cheese where he knew where it was, knew exactly how to get there, almost on autopilot, could do it very nicely, and every day he would just sit and munch on that cheese. One day he goes into the maze, and the cheese is gone. The cheese has been moved. And all of a sudden, it's a metaphor for we may show up one day. Again, it's not going to happen overnight, but in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and our cheese has been moved. What we are comfortable doing, what we're experts at, what we're able to do pretty much on autopilot, all of a sudden isn't relevant anymore. The cheese is moved. And that happened to me, Michael, back really quickly, the early days of DJ Mike P. This is me in college. I just love music, as I mentioned earlier. And I started on my journey out of school. Next slide. I looked like this in high school and college, but I had to become a professional, get into the world of sales and marketing, and cut my hair, took off my NXS shirt, and I joined a company called Dunder Mifflin. No, it wasn't Dunder Mifflin, but it was a company very similar to Dunder Mifflin. What does Dunder Mifflin sell? The Office fans out there? Paper. So I was one of these guys. You could call me, I guess if I wanted to think of myself as a cool guy, I was like John Krasinski's character, Jim, but I was probably a little more Star Wars nerd like Dwight. I wasn't as mean as Dwight, but anyway, you get the idea. I was selling computer paper throughout the 90s and into the 2000s. I was selling printing, computer paper, invoices, direct mail marketing, and it was a very lucrative, very wonderful career, and I was very blessed to have a great journey there. But in the 2000s, something dramatic happened, and my cheese was moved as this thing called the internet came along. And guess what? You all don't get your invoices as often through the mail. You don't read as many papers as you once did, and brochures aren't quite as prevalent as they once were. Everything's digital, right? So there was a huge shift in my industry at the time, and my cheese was moved. So draw the metaphors as you will here in the world of FM and technology and AI and buildings being less utilized today than ever before. I'm not saying I know exactly what's going to happen next, but it's a very interesting story that you might relate to. So what I had to do was, as I mentioned, start a podcast. I wanted to get involved with FM, so I started a podcast called the FM Innovator. I did it on my own. It was done for free. I just wanted to be able to communicate the value of this industry and help many of the vendors, some of the companies you see out on the expo hall, better share their expertise, their products, their services, be FM innovators to you, the facility managers of the world. Bring your expertise to the table in a valuable way, not just hand a brochure, but deliver a speech at NFMT or write a blog or do a research report or have a podcast. And nobody was doing it at the time, so I started one called the FM Innovator, and I haven't jumped there yet. But you know what happens? A year later, I get hired by iOffice. I had the co-founder of iOffice software on my show as a guest, just sharing her story about how she delivers workplace software solutions to the FM world. And she ended up hiring me. Don't jump ahead just yet.
Oh, okay.
Where are we on the slide? Anyway, the story is 6 years later. We've been through a lot of change. I'm still with the same company. iOffice became Space IQ, iOffice and Space IQ. Then we merged with Cadeco and Archibus and ProxyClick and CeraView. And about a year ago, we changed our brand to Eptura, and now we are here today sharing the story. And I'm out sharing the story on my 2 podcasts I mentioned earlier. Next slide, Mike. Where I'm now able to work with a company that supports the idea of education and thought leadership and bringing the inspiration that you all need to be ready for what comes next. And Michael works with me, and we have many members of our team here at booth 630-something. And if you want to talk to them, they could tell you more about the practical side of these products. And Michael has some stories from his experience working with our customers and doing demos and doing some of the solving of actual problems that you're experienced with. And I'll come back and share a little bit more inspiration about how it all ties together. But Michael, take it away.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Mike. And if I look a little nervous, it's because I keep getting the dreaded click to reboot computer button here. So I'm trying to navigate through that. That's why we're having some issues.
Bill Gates with the perfect timing, right? Update Windows at this moment in time.
But no, thank you very much for all being here today. As mentioned, we're going to discuss a little bit about becoming an asset champion and some of the lessons that we've learned. Both Mike and I we've discussed with a lot of our customers and other facility managers on the leadership lessons that they've learned. And so what we really are going to focus on today are some of the key strategies of an effective asset performance and how businesses are leveraging data to, that they're derived from technologies supporting reactive, proactive, and predictive decision making, so enabling their operational efficiencies. What we're looking at here is really just a graphic that has some aspects of all the different things that you're probably familiar with in some way or the other, are part of your existing operations and managing your facilities. You can see here whether it's around preventative maintenance, inventory, tracking and purchasing, of course, vendor management. There's other aspects here too, whether it's managing fleets, as well as running reactive services. Maybe it's on something in the work office or a production asset within your workplace. And these are all things that are part of, and there's much more that is part of the role in when it comes to managing your facilities and your assets. And that definitely requires a lot of work. And then additionally, on top of that, when you add the other elements that come into that role, that really sort of accentuate what you're doing across your team, and that could be the aging infrastructure that's going to, so a lot of people are facing when managing their assets. Many facilities really have our aging infrastructures, which poses a challenge in terms of maintenance, reliability, and safety. Also balancing the needs to upgrade and repair some of those assets that are crucial and dependent upon for your operational efficiencies. Also, there's cost control and budget constraints that go along with managing your facilities, predictive maintenance and implementation. You have different organizations within your companies that you're managing, and so transitioning from reactive maintenance to predictive maintenance can be difficult. And then we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. but you want to make sure you're gathering data across all these different functionalities, and that can sometimes be a daunting task as well. And I think today, we're seeing it more than ever. Changes in compliance and regulation. Facilities must adhere to various regulations, for example, safety, environment, accessibility, and keeping up with the changing laws to ensure that compliances can be daunting as well. But then there's many more too, and Mike and I had an opportunity to talk and hear from a current facility manager as well as customer of Aptura, and she manages a facility in the biotech manufacturing industry with over 20,000 employees across 50 different locations that she's tracking and managing these different assets. And so on top of those other things that I mentioned that are a challenge that a lot of facility managers are facing today, she also had to deal with rapid business expansion, and this came through a series of mergers and acquisitions. So what that meant to her were some inconsistent processes and also different work tech things that she was having to deal with, which brought siloed systems and a lack of organization policies, as well as an inability to sort of understand the different needs across those workspaces. And so there was a lack of adoption from the workplace and ticket submitting processes that they've established. So I'm sharing this with you because this might seem familiar with what you're already doing or resonate with how something that you're facing as well today. And that's what we're seeing across the industry with a lot of the customers that we're talking to. But, this is also, there's another element that is adding to the changing role as a facility manager as well. And I think that's where you're seeing here, I sort of want to talk about how, traditionally you're seeing a list of some of the people that were involved with the facility asset management. You traditionally had your facility managers, technicians, operators, anywhere from, the IT directors and as well as staff, which could be much more than those few examples there. But what we're seeing today, and due to the digitized workforce that has really fallen upon us over these last couple of years, that there are more people involved with asset management, and that could include space analysts, security managers, as well as sustainability managers, given the different regulations that are coming across the organizations, as well as, jumped ahead there as well, see, I do it to myself, Mike, and employee experience coordinators too. With these different people that are involved in asset management, that brings a lot of different groups and customers within an organization that are playing a role in contributing to those assets, that workplace, needing to have work tickets that they're submitting. So including the changes over these past few years, it's going to cause your customer base to grow, whether that's internally or externally. And it's really important for you to understand the different demands of those users too. And here's an example, this is some data that we've collected from one of our quarterly reports that we release each quarter, and this is just showing trends of data that we've collected from different facility managers. And you can see that as a result of the enhanced users that are part of the facility and asset management group, as well as the people that are connected to the workspace through new digital and SaaS products, there's an increase in work orders that are not only being submitted, but are being completed as well. And that can really add a sort of a stress level based on given the different work tasks that you have assigned to your group. So, and part of that work task you can see here is an example of what we've collected some data too around those work orders, is that there really is a need for higher ratio to preventative maintenance work orders compared to reactive maintenance. Part of, and this is pretty important too, because we know that as a preventative maintenance can result in anywhere from 12 to 18% cost savings over reactive maintenance tickets too. And when you add that up over a long period of time, that has significant costs. And so there's other benefits too that come with preventative maintenance. But in conclusion, really with a lot of this data, additionally to this data, we saw that, we know that preventive maintenance orders, those vary based on industries, but generally everybody should be relying upon planned versus unplanned downtime, of course. But this part of this survey, we also showed some of the data that we got was that really 20% of businesses are really operating at that ideal 80 to 20% ratio from preventative to reactive maintenance orders. So there's a lot of work to do, and that's really what we're going to show here as I pass it to Mike, and I'll follow up lately on after that.
All right. I definitely took too much time in the beginning, so I'll move along quickly here and then turn it back to Michael to bring us home. But one of the great quotes I've heard on my show is from W. Edwards Deming. I imagine you all know who he is, famous engineer, and he quotes a lot about data and the importance of data. And without data, you're just another person with an opinion. In God we trust, all others bring data. So many Deming quotes I could share, and I hope you will learn that lesson if you haven't already. All right, what I do on my show, I mentioned, is music. Everything I need to know about human behavior, I learned in the early days of my life in the 70s and 80s in music. And here's a quiz time. Get ready to shout it out. These are some artists that are very frequently referenced on my podcast, and I'm sure many of you know who they are. I'm going to come up there because I can't do it from here. Hey, so who knows who this is? From Dublin, Ireland. I mentioned it earlier. U2, my favorite band of all time. Anybody who's heard my show knows that I love U2, and we reference them all the time. So many great, insightful lyrics. Any U2 fans, you know what I'm talking about. This band, Fleetwood Mac, another classic 70s, 80s, incredible artist, many hits, many interesting songs with lyrics about relationships and so forth. Love referencing it all the time. One more. My favorite, from above the border, north of the border. Why am I going? Is it just freezing on us? Is that what it is?
You have to keep clicking there because that window will keep tapping up.
Oh, okay. So what do I do here?
With the mouse. Click on the mouse and that arrow.
Oh, here. All right. Call it out. Come on, everybody. I'm sorry, Rush. Today's Tom Sawyer. He's a mean guy. All right, anybody knows these because they're in my generation? Well, I've been told, Mike, you need to relate to the younger people out there. Let's learn some new artists. And there's an artist here that I'll share with you. You probably don't know them because they're relatively obscure. But anybody guess who this is? That's right. That's right. Of course, I've never heard of her. No, seriously, obviously Taylor Swift, very talented. Her big newest album that blew up the world about a year or two ago was Midnight. She released songs at 3 a.m., all this fun stuff. But really, again, I dig into lyrics. I love to understand what artists say that give us some revelation of what we're dealing with. And when you're talking about the next generation, you're talking about even us, anybody who is a human being, this is a very insightful lyric. And very quickly, she says, I have this thing where I get older but just never wiser. Me, anybody else? Midnights become my afternoons, maybe not so much. When my depression works the graveyard shift, all the people I've ghosted stand there in the room. Here's the part that really struck me. I should not be left to my own devices. They come with prices and vices. I end up in crisis. Tale as old as time. I wake up screaming and dreaming. One day I'll watch as you're leaving because you got tired of my scheming for the last time. And this is the part everybody knows. It's the hit song. It's me. Hi, I'm the problem, it's me. Everybody at tea time? Everybody agrees. Anyway, what does that say about the young people today? What does it say about us? You know, we're the problem. Change is hard. People like to stick with what they're comfortable with. We get into this world where we need someone to help guide us, someone to lead us, someone to push us out of our comfort zone and help us move along in our journey, our careers, whatever that may be. So that was very interesting to me, and I continue to monitor what's going on in the world of music. And Michael, I'm going to turn it back to you, because change is hard. People overestimate the value of what they currently have and underestimate the value of what they may gain by giving that up. So whether you're trying to adopt a new technology tool for your workplace, the built environment, you're trying to share a new tool with your team, the operators out there, whether you're trying to do a change management plan for a new strategy, for new hybrid working, whatever it may be, there's so many applications. We are the problem. People, we need to coach them along. We need to share with them this vision for what the value of the new change is going to be and get us out of our current comfort zone, that mouse in the maze. We're all going to the same place every day because it's easy for us. Things are changing. We need to be a leader and get people out of that mindset.
Yeah, thank you. And you're right. And one of the ways that we really see a lot of the people that we're talking to establish this change is creating programs within their facility management team to help sustain that. And you can see here, we're going to talk a little bit about just some really simple but easy ways to create that program that's going to enable that change. Maureen Roskoski, which actually was a guest on your podcast, that I pulled this quote from, where she was talking a little bit about what's the difference between a plan and a program. And she's the vice president at Facility Engineering Association, but she said, and embracing a standard allows you to turn a plan into a program. And how is a plan different than a program? It is consistent, it's effective, and it proactively looks at risks that aligns to your organizational objectives. So you want to make sure that you implement this asset management, that your system aligns with your industry standards, as well as the different important pieces to your organization's objectives as well. And so we're going to just go through a few of these different bullet points here. And then, of course, the next one is, being able to analyze and improve. And what does this mean? First, you want to be able to dive into your data. We saw earlier on that slide with that graphic, all the different contributing working pieces to your facilities is going to also contribute a lot of data and information. You want to make sure that you're able to have a clear understanding of your assets and how they're operating. And this will allow you to plan for better allocated resources effectively. You can note that second bullet point. You want to be able to identify which tasks are most critical for maintaining a smooth operation of your assets. And by evaluating each asset thoroughly, you're going to consider such factors as the repair history, total hours of operation, estimated lifetime expectancy, any safety habits that might come along with that. And of course, we want to make sure that you're accurately identifying these assets in the classification as well. And once you've been able to analyze all that data and gather that information on how things are currently operating, you then would want to develop a strategy. Prioritizing critical tasks and maintenance frequencies will really allow you to determine which checklist of which assets should be maintained in the proper order, the different work orders that go along with that. The increased access, as I mentioned earlier, and involvement of all those that are interacting with those assets is going to increase your customer groups. So you want to make sure you're assessing the risks with those different customer groups, and be sure to involve their feedback as part of your strategy. It's more important really than ever to have communication across your organization on how your assets are operating. I think now as well, what we're hearing is the C-suite really is wanting to be more involved in a lot of this. And so you want to make sure not only is that communication on how those are managing properly, you want to know the different demands of those customer groups and what contributes to their operational success as well. So creating that line of communication as well as that strategy aligning with those different groups. And of course, once this plan is in play, you want to monitor, review, and then find ways to improve it. I think really different departments, you have whether maintenance, operations, procurement, you want to make sure that there's a seamless collaboration across these different organizations. So as you continue to monitor and improve this program, and that's one thing too about a program is that once this has been established and you're operating efficiently across that, it allows for you to adjust and be agile as well. Because we saw over these last few years, things have changed drastically. They're going to continue to change, based on different regulations, a new workforce coming in. There's going to be new adoption of new technology that's going to change a lot of that, how we are working as well. So we want to make sure that with the program, we're agile to adapt to those different needs. So here, being able to have that well-executed preventive maintenance, allowing for you to sustain the efficiencies, as well as that last bullet point, frequency and regular audits will maintain data accuracy. That's going to be very important, continuing to prevent any operational inefficiencies. Once you have this plan involved, of course you want to make sure you're having a way that's tracking, maintaining, sustaining that plan. Here, as we took a poll, this was part of that quarterly review we ran again. You can see here, a lot of our customers are using some form of asset management application, some tool out there. About 83% of the individuals that we talked to, but also we have about 60% that are still, whether they're part of their operations, even though they might be using an asset application, they're still using Excel spreadsheets. And you can see here, even 50% an inventory management application. They're looking for that. But one of the parts that we saw that was pretty, jumped out at us was that there's 60% still use spreadsheets, 50% still use email ticketing requests. And as I mentioned earlier, all that data that's coming in that you're wanting to track, that can become cumbersome when you're wanting to not only make sure it's running efficiently, but tracking that data that's associated with it. And this is pretty important too, because I think in this next slide, you'll see here, and as you're walking around, you're seeing the different ways that are allowing there to be more automation when it comes to tracking assets within your facilities. It allows you to, as well as automate different ways that you're maintaining these services. So you'll want to make sure that you have a system that can support those different new evolutions. And as the industry is expanding and growing, there's a big shift in the industry where all this data is being collected in a digitized manner. So having the right tools to support these different methods really is something that is pretty important. You can see, as I mentioned, that customer that both Mike and I spoke to earlier, as part of those different problems that she was facing with the merger and acquisition, on top of all the other aspects that were part of her facility maintenance team. One of the ways that we've been able to help her is through our process that we have within our Eptura product. Now, of course, what we do is we make sure we make it very easy and seamless to see all of your assets and track their different operating elements, wanting to make sure that you're tracking any work order inspection that might be going against it. But as well as we mentioned with this new technology that's coming about, one of the things that we've done is strategically aligned with Autodesk, as was mentioned, and part of that is this Tandem product that allows for her to be able to click on an asset and have this digital twin of her building to see exactly where that asset is in the building, the different correlating assets that are associated to that space as well, and providing that all on a single platform for her to make sure she has that seamless experience. And of course, we provide other ways of doing that too. It doesn't need to necessarily be in a digital twin or 3D BIM model, but we have floor plans where you can see that as well. Really, again, purpose of this is to be able to gather all this data onto a centralized format, making sure you've created, it's supporting that preventative maintenance program that you've been able to create. I'll turn it over to you, Mike. Here, I'll make sure I try to click as best as I can to not...
No spoilers, Michael. Good stuff. So that technology is available, and Michael will be talking more about it in the expo hall at one of the tech demo booths. What do we call them? Product booths. Showcase area number 2. So check that out if you want to get more into the details. But as I kind of summarize our lessons here, again, one more trip down the music path. Anybody remember this band from the 80s? One of my favorites. What happened? Tears for Fears. What was their big hit? Everybody, shout, shout, let it all out. All right, I'm not getting the 9 a.m. conference concert vibe this morning, but one of my favorite songs by them has kind of had a resurgence because it's used down at Disney World at the new Marvel Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind ride. One of the songs you may hear is Everybody Wants to Rule the World, and it's this great song. Again, it's written in the 80s, but when you think about what we've been through over the last several years with all the polarizing headlines, all the undue influence of social media, and how it's really inhibiting so much productivity and so many challenges among our people, it really, it speaks to this human nature we have, which again is something that is fascinating to me. And Tears for Fears says, it's my own design, it's my own remorse. Help me to decide, help me make the most of freedom and of pleasure. Nothing ever lasts forever. Everybody wants to rule the world. And then they say, I can't stand this indecision. When you're talking about your career or going, into a new field or going back to an office, and this is applicable in so many scenarios in today's world and of work in the workplace. I can't stand this indecision. Married with a lack of vision. Everybody wants to rule the world. Say that you'll never ever need it. One headline, why believe it? Everybody wants to rule the world. So everybody wants to rule the world. And that's so much insight there because we all want to rule our world and our workforce wants to rule theirs, and we have a chance to deliver on their expectations, new expectations in many ways of what this new frontier of the built environment looks like. And you all have a front seat and a position which allows you to lead and be an FM innovator or an asset champion. And as we wrap up, I want to just kind of summarize some of the points we made and give you something to take away, some practical advice. Obviously, continue to come to NFMT, visit some of the other conferences and organizations like IFMA. I'm very involved there, Cornet. But how many in the room are salespeople? Trick question, you're all salespeople because everybody has to sell their ideas. One of my guests early on said, the only people in the world who can change things are those who can sell ideas. And you are the change makers who will sell your ideas that you take away from NFMT 2024. Summary, what we need to do, cast a vision and then deliver those change management objectives, understand human nature and behavior and how to influence it. You all, I hope, have seen some insight into what drives people and why we do what we do and why you do what you do, and helping us all move along in our journey is what we're all about. Be proactive and do the influencing. Don't wait around. Don't be reactive, whether it's in your maintenance operations or it's in your career or in your leadership role. It's very easy to get comfortable in what you're good at currently and stay there, but you need to continue to move on. There's so many opportunities in our reducing the footprint of space for offices in the world today. Space management and utilization is a huge thing you can understand. Obviously, data, the availability of data today, and then the tools to analyze that data, the AI interpretation of that allows you to make the right decisions with the actionable insights provided. And then as Michael referenced and I referenced with the Autodesk University experience I had, explore the power of BIM and digital twins and where you can get involved early in that process and be a leader. Because as I said, I'm a Star Wars geek, and our great wise leader Yoda once said,
"You must unlearn what you have learned."
How was that? Come on, not too bad. Thank you. One final quote, because it's intimidating. The expert in anything was once a beginner. You may say, Mike, I don't want to go look for that new cheese. I don't want to get a new credential, learn a new skill. I don't want to get out of my comfort zone because I'm really good at what I do today. Well, the expert in anything, even you, was once a beginner, and you'll have to, in the next 10 years, become an expert in something new. And to wrap it up where I started, Seth Godin gave me the quote that I shared in 2017 when I first spoke at NFMT, and it's still as relevant today. I hope you all realize that if what you did today wasn't hard, you did not add enough value because you didn't expose yourself to enough risk and fear. We all have to embrace the risk, engage in fighting our fears. I mean, getting up here on stage here 7, 8 years later is still intimidating, still nerve-wracking. I told Michael if I ever get up here and say I'm not nervous, tell him, commit me somewhere because I've probably become a psychopath. But I'm always nervous. I'm always a little bit trepidation. But it's such an honor to be able to speak with you as always. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And if you would go to your surveys and give us a good rating and review. As you know, now I'm on YouTube. I got to say, smash that like button. Whatever, ring that bell, become a subscriber, check out our show. And I hope in some small way, Michael and I encourage you all to be an asset champion. Peace out, everybody. Thank you.